Hi, this is a quick walk through Chapter 14 about ECMAScript 6 plus features of JavaScript. Right, so ECMAScript is the specification for the JavaScript language, and the current version, or the version we're talking about, was put down in 2015, and it's usually called ES6 for short. Nice thing about ES6 is it's supported by most modern browsers. However, if you use older browsers, you may want to use an older version. So what do we got? Well, we've got classes. I haven't really talked about classes in JavaScript before. So if you've done any Java or C# or C++ or even Python, you may have come across classes and object-oriented programming before. The nice thing about doing stuff in an object-oriented way is it's another way to encapsulate information, to keep data that should be kept together. And that's usually a good thing to do. Right? So the two things that we encapsulate are the data, the information about the thing, the object, and then the behaviors or the functions that we need to define about an object. Right, so here's one way we can define an object. We just have a person with JSON definition, name of Ada, age of 21, the costume, and then trick or treat. Right, is a way of defining a method on the object. If we define, however, the class using the class keyword, then we can do a little better. Right, so here's another class. This time we're calling it class person, and then we've got some attributes. So this is the way we would do it in Java. This is not JavaScript. Right, we've got keywords public and private, right, and then we've got public in front of, this is a constructor, and public in front of a method, get name, etc. Right, so you announce what you're doing using the class keyword, and attributes are declared at the top of the class, and the constructor is used to instantiate a particular object with its attributes. We define the class methods inside the class declaration, and class methods can access the attributes of the object using the this pointer, and you can instantiate a new version using the new keyword. So how is that different from the way JavaScript works? Well, for a start, in JavaScript everything is public, right? So there's no point in having public and private keywords surrounding things. And here's the class definition for the same class person. Now, with Java, you need to have the constructor called the same thing as the class. Here, that's not true. The JavaScript constructor is just called constructor, and every class in JavaScript has its constructor called constructor. Right, and we pass in. The other thing you'll notice is we don't have to define any variables, any class variables. Class variables always exist, doesn't matter. They may be undefined if we've never used them or set them, but they always exist, so we don't have to declare them. It's right to assign them inside the constructor. That's a good place to do it. And you refer to them using the this pointer, which is similar to the way Java works. So then once you've defined that class, you can create new instances of the class, Alice and Bob, and that all works the way you would expect, right? So classes are declared using the class keyword. We don't need to declare attributes. They already exist regardless. There's only one constructor, and it's just called constructor. Class methods are declared inside the class declaration, but you don't need the word function to indicate that a method is a function. Just provide the name and the parameters, right? You'll notice there's no function keyword in our person class. You can use the this pointer to access attributes, and you can instantiate new copies or new instances of the object using the new keyword. You access methods using the dot notation, and you can pass instantiated objects around as variables just like you would expect. So it's very similar to Java, but there are some key differences there. So normally with JavaScript, the person class would be defined inside the file person.java. In JavaScript, we usually don't do that separate, don't have a separate file for each class. So here we might have the class dog and the class cat and maybe the class goldfish all defined inside the one class. You can do class inheritance, right? So using the extends keyword. So here we have a class dog that can sit and bark, and then we can extend the class dog with to define with the keyword extends, and now we have a class husky. Husky is a child class inheriting from dog, and we call the parent constructor using the super keyword, and then we can add some functionality, right? So then we can make a husky and do the same things that we would with the dog, but also do the extra things that a husky can do. So it is a dog, and it's just a specialization of the dog. Now, when we deal with classes, one problem we have to deal with, or one issue we have to deal with, is the scoping of this pointer. I call it a pointer because I'm used to it from C++ and C#. So this keyword. And the reason is because depending on where you refer to this pointer, it's going to refer to different objects. This is a different object in one scope compared to another scope. That's why it's very important within JavaScript objects to start using arrow functions when you need to use the this pointer. Right, so here's an anonymous function, and we could write exactly the same thing using the arrow notation. Right, equals greater than is the arrow notation. And we can actually make that even more compact by just using that. So we don't even have to use the parentheses, we don't have to use the curly braces, we don't have to use return. We just say name becomes hello plus name. However, it's usually better to leave the parentheses in there just so that it's a little easier to read, but it doesn't, you don't have to. The nice things about arrow functions is they're useful for specifying anonymous callback functions. Right, so here's an array that we want to work with, and we want to map multiplying 2 by the array, and that's one way of doing it using an anonymous function, but we can do something very concisely using arrow functions. So get used to seeing that sort of notation. It does take a little bit to unpack, right? Given that it's virtually the same as what's happening up here. But it is very concise and it's a very powerful way of working. Now, the reason I'm talking about it now is because of the this pointer. Right, the keyword this, and once you're inside a function, you can refer to the object that the function was called on by using the this keyword, right? So this in the bark function refers to doggy, the Fido doggy. Okay. The problem becomes that this variable gets assigned to whichever object it was called on, even if the function is assigned to a new object later. So let's unpack what's happening there. Right, we have a doggy called Fido that woofs. We have a doggo called Spot that yips. And if we call doggy.bark, it'll print out Fido woofs because that's the name we assigned. If we call doggo.bark, it'll say Spot yips. Okay. However, now we can redefine doggy.bark to the doggo.bark, right? And now when we call doggy.bark, whereas before we had Fido woofs, now we get Fido yips, right? So we're still calling this on doggy, but we're using the doggo version of bark. Now that can cause problems. In particular, it can cause problems with anonymous callback functions, right? So here's a class person. We've got our constructor and we call greet all, and it's just going to go through a people array, and for every person in the people array it's going to say, hi person name, I'm whatever this name is, right? And the problem with this particular implementation of trying to do that is this is not clear what it is, right? Because we're inside this function and we haven't used an arrow function, this just refers to the context of the anonymous function, and it's just itself. And this, it's not an object, it's not part of an object. So it just thinks, oh, I'm not part of an object, therefore this is undefined, right? It always exists regardless of whether you're inside an object or not. But because I'm not inside an object, its value is just going to be undefined. So what's happening at this line of this anonymous function is it's calling undefined.name, and undefined.name doesn't do anything. If you do virtually the same thing, but now define that anonymous function using arrow notation, then now the arrow notation uses this of the encapsulating object, right? So instead of it being this is the anonymous function, this is now the class person. So that's a little different from the previous way of doing things, right? This is the anonymous function. It's not person. So you can do something called binding, right? If you permanently associate a particular this value with a function, no matter where that what the object being called in that function is, right? And we'll look a little later at another JavaScript library called React that uses this extensively. Bottom line is, if you're creating a callback function, always use arrow functions. Otherwise, something will go wrong. Okay, quick other few things. You can do some interesting destructuring and spreading, right? So we can do a quick assignment on particular variables just by putting the variables in a list on the left and an array on the right, and it all works pretty nicely. We can do the same thing, but instead of for an array, for an object. That all works pretty well. And then we can do some other funky stuff. If we only want to pull out a few of the pieces, we can use the spread operator, which is 3 dots, to say, okay, I want to capture the rest of this array after those first 2 width and height elements. And the rest is put in a separate subarray, 30 and 40. The spread operator is also useful for specifying functions with a variable number of arguments, right? So here's a print args function, and we use the spread operator before the argument, and that means we don't care how many arguments are passed in. we'll do something with all of them. And so if we pass in 3 arguments, ABC, we print out ABC. If we pass in 6 arguments, we print out the 6 arguments. Similarly, we can do something like a sum operation to sum all of the arguments together. Most of the coding you've been doing so far has been very simple, relatively speaking. But oftentimes we need to figure out how to split up code into separate JavaScript files. And the idea is that they're separate modules. Right, and here is a way to use the type attribute of the script tag to say that this is a JavaScript module. So that's a way to do it, but the most common way will not be to go through to do it inside the browser, but to use it through an external tool like Webpack. And the nice thing about modules is that now you can just import the pieces of the module that you want. Whereas in Java, you would import java.util.random. In JavaScript, you import random from util. Right? So it's a way of picking and choosing what you're after. So be careful about that leading /. That's indicating that the file, the JavaScript, the library, the module that you're interested in is in the current directory. If you leave it off, then import is going to try and pull it from your node modules path, which is going to differ from section to section or from installation to installation. Right, so just like some other tools, in order to make things visible, you need to give the export keyword to allow things to be available. Right, so if we import those things from my module, then we can use those things within our index.js file. And there's lots of ways to do it. How you do it depends on exactly your style. However, mixing styles is rarely a good thing. So decide on how you're going to do it and then stick with that particular style. Right, so you can use the as keyword as an alias so that you can refer to your module the same way, or you can refer to it as my foo. It's sometimes nice to do that. Right, there's also a few other bits and pieces that might be of interest. There's template strings, right, which you can add into a variable into another string. That's kind of nice. So here we can set the variable name and then include name in our string later on. Notice you can put something a little bit more extensive in there. So that's a little bit odd, but anyway, you're better off pulling that functionality out and assigning it outside of the template string. Okay, that was a quick run through chapter 14, and as I said, the main takeaway is about the object-oriented nature or things you can do with JavaScript that are similar to Java but a little different as far as the way constructors are called, the way everything is public, but it's a nice way of encapsulating both data and functionality that should live together.